Spelljammer is finally here for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in all of its glory. And whether you're excited to jam out in wild space or perhaps still crawling through the caves of Faerun's Underdark with it, Spelljammer brings one thing everyone can be excited about, or, well, at least all of you dungeon masters like myself can be excited about, good old-fashioned D&D monsters for your table. So, after reading through the 60 or so new stat blocks we get in the Spelljammer's Booze Astral Menagerie, I actually had a tough time cutting this list down to just 5 monsters because I was quite impressed with these monsters in their monster design. I have been critical in the past of books like Fizbin's, which bored me, and so credit where credit is due. These monsters were on point and really exciting in my opinion. Certainly a breath of fresh air. So, down to brass tacks. Let's kick this list off with 2 monsters that deserve a little runner-up love, even though they didn't quite fully make the list. First, in our honorable mentions, is the Gage. This monster is just so cool. It has everything I want it to have for a CR4. It's a big, scary aberration bug that has 12 intelligence, just the right amount of hit points, throws psychic damage, and can even paralyze a player as part of its attack. Already, I'm seeing a pack of 5 or 6 of these little CR4s moving together against my higher level parties, and with a climb speed of 30 feet, it gives me plenty of options for setting up a really unique battlefield, or hell, maybe even just setting up a really cool scene where like 100 of them cascade and stampede over the edge of a cliff to scare the crap out of my players. Definitely some Starship Troopers vibes here. Great monster for any D&D 5e game, period. And as for our second runner-up, we have the Cosmic Horror, which can best be described as the almost creature. It's almost deadly enough to use, but it's statted out a little oddly, in my opinion. It's got some great moves and really cool design, a huge hit point pool of 280 points on average with legendary resistance and legendary actions that will let this thing even grab a player and then teleport them away 120 feet, not even counting its DC 21 Wisdom Psychic AoE bomb. But while it does do a fair amount of damage, it's just not bursty enough to be a CR 18 creature, in my opinion, especially when you consider what like a group of level 14 characters are capable of now with Tasha's, or even a group of level 17 characters. So very cool, great art, lots of little things that it does well, but not quite top 5 material. All right, so now to our official top 5, what do I call them? Like deliciously evil monsters for Spelljammer. In no particular order, we have the Fear leading off our list. As someone who is a massive fan of hags, including the Night Hag in D&D, please keep giving me intelligent monsters like this. I love them. This thing is so freaking cool, and it is perfectly equipped to torment the party. It's just a little CR5, but it's the invisibility that makes this thing so deadly for players. And written right into the description, the Fear purposefully waits for its targets to sleep before feeding on their nightmares. So fair game, players, sorry. This is a creature DMs could, and in my opinion, should use alongside other story elements, perhaps while passing through a haunted forest or down into the Underdark, as it's mentioned in the book, as a stowaway on the player's ship while they are dealing with, I don't know, another completely separate plot line. And just to add to that last little suggestion, fears don't need air. So storing them in bags of holding or having them attached to the underside of a ship is totally viable, DMs. I mean, both of those are a little bit of a stretch because, you know, physics. But screw it! It's our fantasy world, totally fair play. Next up, we have my new favorite giant type, the Bayrog or Brog, or however you say it. The Brog is excellent design, and I'll tell you why. Action economy. The Brog is a simple monster, and that's really the beauty of it. The premise is simple. What happens when you give a giant 4 arms instead of 2. Well, now they can throw 2 rocks or make 4 fist attacks. Oh, and they have a deliciously evil ability that instant kills players that smugly get too close and fail a dex save. That's right, if the paladin in that heavy plate armor gets too close and fails a dex to avoid a grapple, the Bayrog has an ability called Hideous Rend. Well, the Rend deals damage at the start of the player's turn for a whopping 8d10 plus 5, that's an average of 49, and a max of 85. If the player drops to 0 because of this attack, they're ripped into 4 pieces as they are literally quartered right in the middle of combat. Do not pass go, do not receive healing word. Honestly, I love this monster. It's perfect. It's the perfect CR6 monster, and it's just scary enough to use as a solo fight against lower level parties, which is how giants should have always been, right? Absolutely terrifying instead of the pushovers that they have been so far in D&D 5e. One small little house rule that I would recommend with this thing though, is to let them mix and match their attacks instead of just 2 rocks or 4 fists. Let them hit someone twice at a 10-foot range and then still throw a rock. It's obvious, really, but clunky to describe in the stat block, so I get it, wizards. Next up is a monster that not every dungeon master out there is going to be excited about, but hear me out, okay? These can and should, in certain settings, be reskinned very easily. The CR2 Space Clown. Look, I get it, okay? But don't get caught up with the lore of this thing, which honestly isn't that terrible, and I kind of dig their origins. But don't let the thought of like space clowns with ray guns ruining your Tolkien-esque game setting turn you off before you give these things a chance, because they're awesome. They are an absolutely fantastic monster. Fiends that feast on human flesh and hit for a massive 46 plus 3 spell touch attack at CR2, can also throw ranged psychic damage that incapacitates, has access to minor illusion and spider climb, which is an amazing toolkit for DMs out there, can disguise itself with phantasmal form. Oh, and did I mention it has a dying burst of corrosive acid? I mean, come on. This is the definition of a deliciously evil monster, and the design is honestly top-notch. If you do want to reskin these things, just look to Dragonlance's Bozak Draconians for inspiration. And ray guns that incapacitate could easily be wands or handheld crystal staves or scepters or something. You can even have the fiends use purple lightning swords instead of their shock touch spell attack, and have them shoot out psychic ray beams instead. Or just reskin the damage a little bit and make them a water elemental fiend if you want, okay? You can really go nuts if you don't like space clowns with ray guns, but don't skip this monster just because of that theme. It's a great one. Our 4th entry here is a massive CR16 creature that is typically neutral and only gets to speak 3 times in its entire life. If, of course, it has something, quote, profound to say. I, of course, am speaking of the Zodar. Man, this is such a strange monster to include because it doesn't do any damage really, right? With just 2 crushing fist attacks for a measly 21 damage on average. But what makes this thing cool is not the stat block per se, but rather the story elements that Wizards delivered with it, okay? It can force a player to teleport, but only 60 feet, so not very far. And while that does do some damage, it's not really going to kill anybody with it. But it's also a monster with access to literally the best spell in D&D 5e, Wish. And that counts for something because it not only opens up the playbook for all kinds of Dungeon Master shenanigans, but when it casts it, the Zodar kills itself, okay? So it's also the mystery of these creatures that can be an entire 3 or 4 session arc built around the players discovering a floating, timeless, spaceless room of 20 of them inside. Who put them there? How do you get them to actually cast a spell and kill themselves? Do these things feel anything? Sorrow, joy, depression, resentment? How do the players engage with them in non-verbal ways? Are Zodars the key to saving the PC's kingdom from the evil wizard? Is the big bad evil guy villain trying to use a Zodar to corrupt one? What would they do if they found a room of 20 of them? Are the Zodars linked somehow so that they will all use their single wish in a combined effort that could change the cosmos itself or even kill a god. Talk about an inspiring monster. And as far as monsters that can throw a party for a loop and wreck them with a dying wish, I think the Zodar fits perfectly the deliciously evil description to a T, in the hands of a right or perhaps even wrong dungeon master. And finally, rounding out the last of our 5 evil Spelljammer monsters is the Kneefalgu. Yes. This monster is brilliant. Its motivations are simple. It collects brains. That's it. That's all it wants to do is get that brain. This wonderful, large-sized, creepy monster is the epitome of the type of monster you would build an entire horror movie around. Spell casting with options like invisibility, hold person, and darkness. 3 attacks that hit pretty decently for a CR4 at 2d8 plus 2. A psychic mind blast, the ability to speak any language you want it to as the DM, and oh yeah, a nasty attack called Extract Brain that can one-shot a player if they have been incapacitated from that psychic mind blast. Oh, and it's pretty fast, by the way. The Kneefalgu is like the Intellect Devourer all grown up and on steroids, okay? It can stalk the party if needed. It can be a clever sewer hunter that the players are trying to hunt down themselves after following a trail of bodies with their brains all sucked out. And it can even be reasoned with if you want to really creep your players out just that little bit more. It hits all the right notes for throwing something new and lethal with just the right amount of aberration to set the tone. And with the ability to combo one-shot your players, it certainly can kill off a PC in the early stages. And I'm happy to see that the DC for this has been set to a default of 14 for that wisdom save, because it's a barbarian's worst nightmare, a perfectly horrifying creature. So there we go, guys. 5 or kind of 7 almost of just the best, most deliciously well-crafted monsters in all of Spelljammer. Hopefully you guys that aren't excited about Spelljammer or playing Spelljammer will take some of these and steal them and put them in your games, because I gotta tell you, I was genuinely impressed with the design. But now I want to hand it off to you guys. What do you guys think? Have you guys read through Spelljammer? I've been seeing some comments here and there, seeing some stuff on Twitter, seeing some stuff in YouTube comments about Spelljammer's release so far. I won't get into that, but as far as the monsters go, these things I think really shine through for any D&D table, and I think that's always worth highlighting. So did I miss any? Is there anything out there that you guys think was absolutely spectacular that really inspired you? Let me know in the comments down below. I of course want to give a massive shout out to all of the incredible, wonderful, sexy, saucy patrons over at welcomeadventures.com. It's because of you guys that I get to keep doing this, and so for that I'm just so grateful. If you guys like what I do here, you want to support some more content like this and snag some rewards for yourself, welcomeadventures.com is a great way to do that. If this is your first time here and you love role-playing games as much as I do, or maybe you're learning to love role-playing games as much as I do, I would love to have you subscribe. I put out videos on GM tips, player tips, tutorials, and more stuff like this, so if this sounds like something you might be interested in, hit the subscribe button down below and come join us. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Cody, and may your games be filled with awesome memories and even better friends. I'll catch you guys next time.